The salvage yard on Kepler 442b stretched for miles across the rust-colored wasteland, a graveyard of crashed ships and broken dreams. Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands as he surveyed the latest arrival, a Confederation patrol vessel that had crash-landed 3 days ago. The alien crew had been evacuated, but the ship remained, slowly sinking into the planet's unstable soil. Marcus had been working salvage for 12 years, ever since the war ended. Humans weren't supposed to be good at this kind of work. Too emotional, too unpredictable, according to the Galactic Council. But Marcus had proven them wrong time and again. His small operation on this backwater planet might not look like much, but he could fix anything that flew, crawled, or hovered. The morning air carried the metallic taste of iron oxide as Marcus loaded his toolkit onto the hover sled. The Confederation ship was a K-class destroyer, sleek and silver, designed by the Zephyrian Empire. Even half buried in the muck, it was beautiful. The hull showed impact damage along the starboard side, but the main structure looked intact. As he approached the wreck, something caught his attention. A sound, faint, rhythmic, almost like tapping. Marcus killed the hover sled's engine and listened. There it was again. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. The sound was coming from inside the ship. Marcus frowned. The evacuation report had been clear. All crew members accounted for. But someone or something was definitely alive in there. He grabbed his cutting torch and emergency medical kit, then climbed onto the ship's hull. The main airlock was buried too deep in the muck to reach, but there was an emergency hatch near the bridge. Marcus traced the outline with his torch, the plasma beam slicing through the reinforced metal like butter. The hatch fell inward with a wet thud. The smell hit him first. Blood, fear, and something else he couldn't identify. Marcus dropped through the opening, his boots splashing in ankle-deep water that had leaked through the damaged hull. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows across the tilted corridor. The tapping was louder now, coming from somewhere deeper in the ship. Marcus followed the sound, stepping carefully over debris and twisted metal. The ship's internal gravity was failing, making everything feel slightly off balance. He found the source in what had once been the ship's detention area. Behind a reinforced door, barely visible in the dim light, was the strangest creature Marcus had ever seen. It looked like a wolf, but wrong in every way that mattered. Too tall, too thin, with bone-white fur that seemed to glow in the emergency lighting. Its eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and filled with intelligence and desperation. Heavy chains bound its limbs to the cell wall. The creature's muzzle was clamped shut with a metal device that looked more like torture equipment than standard restraint. One of the chains had partially broken, allowing the creature to move just enough to tap against the wall with a piece of debris. The wolf thing saw Marcus and froze. For a moment, they stared at each other across the flooded cell. Then the creature's ears flattened against its head, and it made a sound, a whimper that somehow conveyed both hope and terror. Marcus had seen a lot of things in his years doing salvage, but this was different. This wasn't some dangerous criminal or prisoner of war. This was someone being held against their will, and they needed help. The cell's electronic lock was dead, but the doorframe had been warped in the crash. Marcus wedged his crowbar into the gap and threw his weight against it. The door shrieked in protest, then suddenly gave way, sending him stumbling backward into the murky water. The albino wolf watched him with those strange pale eyes, trembling. Up close, Marcus could see the creature was female. Her white fur was matted with blood and filth, and the chains had rubbed raw wounds on her wrists and ankles. "Easy," Marcus said softly, the way he might talk to a frightened animal. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's ears twitched at the sound of his voice. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. There was definitely intelligence there, more than animal cunning. This was someone, not something. Marcus pulled his plasma cutter from his belt and adjusted it to its lowest setting. "I'm going to cut those chains," he said, moving slowly so she could see what he was doing. "This might get warm, but it won't hurt you." The first chain parted with a sharp crack. The wolf's arm dropped to her side and she flexed her fingers. Definitely fingers, not claws, as if she hadn't been able to move them in days. Marcus worked quickly but carefully, cutting through each restraint while keeping up a steady stream of reassuring words. When he finally removed the muzzle, the creature took a shuddering breath and spoke in a voice like wind through silver chimes. "Thank you." Marcus nearly dropped his cutter. You can talk. Yes, the word was barely a whisper.
I am Lyra of the
Moonkin Pack. Moonkin. Marcus had never heard of them. But then again, the galaxy was full of species he'd never encountered. I'm Marcus, human. Lyra's eyes widened. Human? She struggled to sit up straighter. But humans are forbidden from Confederation space. This isn't Confederation space, Marcus said. This is an independent salvage world. You're safe here. Fresh water was rising in the corridor outside the cell. The ship was sinking faster now. Marcus helped Lyra to her feet, surprised by how light she was despite her height. She was weak, probably hadn't eaten in days. We need to get out of here, he said. Can you walk? Lyra nodded, but when she tried to take a step, her legs buckled. Marcus caught her before she could fall. Okay, we'll do this the hard way. He scooped her up in his arms, ignoring her startled gasp. She weighed less than his toolkit. The journey back to the emergency hatch was treacherous. The ship was listing badly now, and the water was up to Marcus's knees. Emergency lights flickered and died one by one, leaving them in near total darkness. But Marcus had worked in worse conditions. He felt his way along the corridor walls, following the path he'd memorized on the way in. Lyra clung to him, her breathing shallow and rapid. When they finally reached the hatch, Marcus could see blue sky above, the most beautiful sight in the galaxy. He boosted Lyra up first, then hauled himself out of the dying ship. They lay on the hull for a moment, both breathing hard. The ship groaned beneath them, settling deeper into the mud. Thank you, Lyra whispered again. You saved my life. Marcus looked down at her pale, ethereal features and felt something shift inside his chest. That's what we do, he said simply. We help. But even as he said it, Marcus knew this was different. This wasn't just about helping someone in need. This was about something much bigger, something that would change everything. Marcus's workshop was a converted cargo container, reinforced and expanded over the years into something resembling a proper repair facility. The walls were lined with salvaged equipment, spare parts, and tools from a dozen different worlds. It wasn't much to look at, but it was home. Lyra sat on the examination table Marcus had improvised from a cargo crate, her pale blue eyes taking in every detail of the workshop. She had barely spoken during the hoversled ride back from the wreck, but Marcus could see her mind working, cataloging potential threats and escape routes. Drink this, Marcus said, offering her a cup of water. Slowly, Lyra accepted the cup with hands that trembled slightly. When she lifted it to her lips, Marcus noticed the strange markings on her wrists. Not tattoos, but something that looked like circuit patterns etched directly into her skin. How long were you in that cell? He asked, pulling up a stool to sit across from her. 17 days. Lyra replied without hesitation. They fed me once every 3 days. Water when they remembered. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. Who did this to you? Lyra's ears flattened against her head. Commander Voss, Confederation Security. He said I was a terrorist, a threat to galactic peace. She took another careful sip of water, but that was not true. What really happened? For a moment, Lyra just stared at the cup in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I discovered something they did not want known. Marcus waited. He had learned that sometimes the best way to get information was simply to be patient. The Moonkin are, how do you say? Empaths, Lyra continued. We can sense the emotional states of other beings. It made us valuable to the Confederation as negotiators and counselors. But it also made us dangerous. Dangerous how? We can sense lies. Lyra looked up at him with those unsettling pale eyes. Commander Voss was lying about many things. The trade agreements with the outer colonies, the reasons for increased military presence in neutral space, the true purpose of the research station on Zerion Prime. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of research? Weapons, Lyra said simply. Weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. They were building something that could kill entire species while leaving others untouched. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Genocide weapons. And if the Confederation was developing them in secret, it meant they were planning to use them. That's why they arrested you, he said. Lyra nodded. I tried to warn my pack, but Voss moved too quickly. They said I was spreading seditious lies, that I was mentally unstable. No trial, no legal representation, just chains in a cell. Marcus stood up and began pacing. The Confederation might present itself as a peaceful alliance of worlds, but he'd seen enough during the war to know better. They were just another empire dressed up in prettier language. Your pack, he said. Where are they now? Dead, probably. Lyra's voice was flat, emotionless. Or in cells like mine. The Moonkin trusted the Confederation. We thought we were partners, not tools to be discarded when we became inconvenient. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her. Really looked at her. The white fur, the pale eyes, the delicate bone structure. She was beautiful in an alien way that should have been unsettling but somehow wasn't. More than that, she was brave. How many beings would risk everything to expose genocide? Well, he said finally, they made one mistake. What is that? They underestimated humans. Lyra tilted her head. I do not understand. Marcus grinned, and for the first time since rescuing her, Lyra's expression showed something other than fear or sadness. Humans are stubborn. When we see something wrong, we can't just walk away. Even when we should. You would help me, but you barely know me. I know enough. Marcus sat back down and leaned forward. I know you were chained up like an animal for trying to prevent genocide. I know you're probably the only witness left alive. And I know the Confederation is going to come looking for you. As if summoned by his words, the workshop's proximity alarms began to chime. Marcus moved to the security console and pulled up the external cameras. 3 ships were descending toward the salvage yard, sleek black vessels with Confederation markings. How did they find me so quickly? Lyra whispered. Marcus was already moving, grabbing essential tools and supplies. Probably tracking something. Biosignatures maybe, or a chip. He paused. Those markings on your wrists, are they just decorative? Lyra looked down at the circuit-like patterns on her skin. No, they are neural interfaces. They allow us to connect with computer systems directly, but they also broadcast location data, Marcus finished. Damn. The ships were landing now, kicking up clouds of rust-colored dust. Through the cameras, Marcus could see armed figures emerging from the vessels. They moved with military precision, surrounding the workshop. Surrender the fugitive, human. A voice boomed from external speakers. You are harboring a dangerous criminal. Comply and you will not be harmed. Marcus looked at Lyra, who had gone very still. Her pale eyes were fixed on the security monitor, watching the soldiers take positions around the building. Do you trust me? He asked. Lyra met his gaze. You saved my life. You fed me, gave me water, listened to my story. Yes, I trust you. Good. Because we're about to do something incredibly stupid. Marcus opened a panel in the workshop floor, revealing a hidden compartment filled with weapons and equipment. Not salvage. Military-grade hardware left over from his days in the Colonial Defense Force. You were a soldier, Lyra observed. Engineer Corps. But yeah, I've shot back when shot at. Marcus pulled on a tactical vest and checked the charge on a plasma rifle. The thing about humans is we don't know when to quit. Sometimes that gets us killed. Sometimes it saves the galaxy. The external speakers crackled again. This is your final warning, human. Surrender the fugitive or we will take her by force. Marcus keyed his own external communicator. This is Marcus Chen, owner and operator of Chen Salvage. You are trespassing on independent territory. I suggest you leave before I file a complaint with the Neutral Zone Authority. The response was a plasma bolt that punched through the workshop's outer wall, missing Marcus by inches. Well, he said, helping Lyra down into the hidden compartment. So much for diplomacy. The workshop's defensive systems, another little secret Marcus had kept from his neighbors, came online with a high-pitched whine. Heavy blast shields dropped over the windows and automated weapon turrets emerged from concealed positions. How many soldiers? Lyra asked as Marcus sealed the compartment above them. 30, maybe 40. Standard assault team. Marcus was already working at a computer terminal, bringing up building schematics and escape routes. They think they're dealing with one mechanic and his alien friend. What are they actually dealing with? Marcus's grin was sharp and dangerous. A very pissed-off human who really doesn't like bullies. The tunnel beneath the workshop was one of several Marcus had dug over the years. Call it paranoia or preparation. Either way, it was about to save their lives. They crawled through the narrow passage as explosions shook the building above. Where does this lead? Lyra whispered. Hangar 3, Marcus replied. Where I keep the good stuff. They emerged behind a stack of cargo containers 200 meters from the workshop. Marcus could see his building burning. Automated defenses still firing at the Confederation soldiers. It wouldn't last much longer. I am sorry, Lyra said quietly. I have destroyed your home. Buildings can be replaced, Marcus said. People can't. Hangar 3 looked like just another storage unit from the outside. But inside was Marcus's pride and joy, a heavily modified courier ship called the Defiant Spark. She wasn't pretty, but she was fast, well-armed, and completely invisible to most tracking systems. Where will we go? Lyra asked as Marcus fired up the engines. Marcus thought about the weapons research station on Zerion Prime, about the genocide being planned in secret, about all the innocent beings who would die if someone didn't stop it. First, we're going to disappear, he said as the ship lifted off. Then we're going to gather evidence. And then we're going to show the galaxy exactly what the Confederation is really up to. Below them, his workshop collapsed in a pillar of flame and smoke. But Marcus wasn't looking back. He was looking forward toward whatever came next. The war might be over, but apparently his fight wasn't. The Defiant Spark drifted in the shadow of an asteroid field, running silent and dark. Marcus had cut all non-essential systems, leaving only life support and the passive sensors. To anyone looking, they were just another piece of space debris. It had been 3 days since their escape from Kepler 442b. 3 days of careful navigation through hyperspace dead zones and abandoned shipping lanes. Marcus knew every smuggler's route and pirate hideout from here to the galactic rim, knowledge that was finally proving useful. Lyra sat at the secondary console, her pale eyes reflecting the dim glow of the instruments. She had been quiet since they jumped to hyperspace, but Marcus could sense her internal struggle. Every few hours she would touch the circuit-like markings on her wrists, wincing as if they caused her pain. They're still transmitting, she said finally. I can feel the signal trying to connect. Marcus looked up from the engine diagnostics he was running. Can you turn them off? Not without severing the neural pathways permanently. It would leave me diminished, unable to interface with most technology. Lyra's ears drooped. But perhaps that is necessary. Hold on, Marcus said, moving to the engineering station. Let me try something first. He pulled up the ship's medical scanner and ran it over Lyra's wrists. The readout showed a complex network of biomechanical components integrated with her nervous system, but there was something else. A secondary circuit that seemed to serve no biological function. There, Marcus pointed to the display. That's your tracking implant. It's not part of your natural neural interface, it was added later. Lyra studied the scan. During processing? When we first joined the Confederation, they said it was for our protection. Emergency medical monitoring. Of course they did. Marcus was already pulling tools from a medical kit. I can remove it, but it's going to hurt. A lot, Lyra met his eyes. Do it. The procedure took 2 hours. Marcus had to work carefully, tracing the implant's connections without damaging the existing neural pathways. Lyra gritted her teeth and gripped the chair arm so tightly her claws left gouges in the metal. But she never asked him to stop. When it was finally over, Marcus held up a small metallic device no bigger than a grain of rice. One tracking chip formally attached to your nervous system. Lyra flexed her fingers, testing the connections. I can still interface with the ship's computer. But the constant background signal, it's gone, silent. She looked at Marcus with something approaching wonder. Thank you. Marcus crushed the chip under his boot and swept the pieces into the recycler. Now we can start fighting back. He brought up a star chart on the main display. According to your information, the research station is here in the Zerion system. It's deep in Confederation space, heavily defended. Getting close won't be easy. It will be impossible for you, Lyra said. Humans are banned from Confederation space. Your ship's signatures will trigger every sensor grid within 3 parsecs. Marcus grinned. That's assuming they recognize the ship as human. He keyed in a command sequence and the Defiant Spark's hull began to shift and reconfigure. What had looked like a battered human courier vessel transformed into something sleeker, more alien in design. Holographic hull plating, Marcus explained as Lyra stared in amazement. Cost me a fortune, but it's worth it for situations like this. Right now we look like a Altarian merchant vessel, but the engine signatures, the drive harmonics, all masked. This ship has more false identities than a politician has promises. Marcus was already plotting a course. The trick is knowing which one to use. Their first stop was Freehold Station, a notorious den of smugglers and information brokers orbiting a dead star in neutral space. Marcus docked at a maintenance bay owned by an old friend, a Rigelian named Korax who asked no questions as long as the credits were good. "I need information on Confederation military movements," Marcus told Korax over drinks in the station's cantina. "Specifically around the Xerion system." Korax's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, the Rigelian equivalent of raising an eyebrow. "Xerion? That's black site territory, my friend? Even the smugglers avoid that system. What do you know about it? Rumors mostly. Heavy military presence, restricted shipping lanes, and ships that go in but don't come out." Korax leaned forward. "But I did hear something interesting last week. A Confederation supply convoy got hit by pirates near the border, made off with a full cargo manifest." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Where can I find these pirates?" "Dead, mostly. Confederation retaliation was swift and brutal, but their fence might still be alive. A draconian named Vex who operates out of the Titan Nebula. The Titan Nebula was 3 days away through hyperspace, a region of ionized gas and stellar debris that played havoc with sensors and communications, perfect for hiding from the law or conducting business away from prying eyes. Vex turned out to be a sleek reptilian female with chrome cybernetic implants and the most ruthless smile Marcus had ever seen. She operated from a mobile base, a converted asteroid mining platform that drifted through the nebula's denser regions. "You want to see Confederation shipping manifests?" Vex hissed when Marcus made his request. "That information killed 12 good pirates. What makes you think I'll sell it to some random human?" Marcus placed a credit chip on the table between them. "Because you're a businesswoman, and this contains enough credits to buy 3 ships like the ones they lost." Vex's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "Tempting. But credits are worthless if I'm dead. Why do you want this information?" Marcus had anticipated this question. "Because the Confederation killed someone I cared about, and I want payback." It was close enough to the truth. The Confederation hadn't killed anyone Marcus loved, but they had tried to kill Lyra. In his mind, that amounted to the same thing. Vex studied him for a long moment, then laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I like your honesty, human, and your credits." She produced a data chip from her jacket. "Shipping manifests from the last 6 months. What you do with the information is your business." Back on the Defiant Spark, Marcus and Lyra pored over the stolen data. The manifests painted a disturbing picture. Tons of rare biological samples being shipped to Xerion Prime, along with specialized equipment and something called genetic template processors. "This confirms everything," Lyra said quietly. "They're not just researching weapons, they're preparing to deploy them." "How long before they're ready?" Marcus asked. Lyra consulted her neural interface, pulling up files she'd memorized during her time as a Confederation consultant. "Based on these supply requirements and the research timeline I was shown, perhaps 2 months, maybe less. 2 months to prevent genocide." Marcus felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. "Then we better get moving." But first, they needed more than just shipping manifests. They needed proof, something so undeniable that even the Confederation's allies wouldn't be able to ignore it. "There's a science station in the Kepler system," Lyra said as they studied the star charts. "Small, lightly defended. They might have research data or communication logs that could help us." "Might isn't good enough," Marcus replied. "We need certainty." He thought about the problem for a moment, then smiled. "I have an idea. How do you feel about playing dead?" Lyra's ears perked up. "Explain." "The Confederation thinks you're a terrorist. What if you were captured by bounty hunters and were being transported for interrogation? It would give us a reason to be in the area, and might even get us inside their facilities." "That is risky," Lyra said slowly. "Extremely risky," Marcus agreed. "But it's also our best chance of getting close enough to gather real evidence." Lyra was quiet for several minutes, weighing the options. Finally, she nodded. "I trust you. If you believe this will work, then we try it." Marcus began modifying the ship's configuration again, this time transforming it into something resembling a bounty hunter's vessel. The changes took most of the night, but by morning they looked like legitimate mercenaries. "Remember," Marcus said as they approached the outer edge of Confederation space, "I'm Vance Cross, freelance bounty hunter. You're my prisoner being transported for the reward. No matter what happens, we stick to the story. And if they don't believe us, Marcus checked his weapons one more time. Then we improvise. The first checkpoint was a routine patrol vessel. The officer who boarded their ship was young, probably fresh out of the academy. He barely glanced at their forged documents before clearing them for passage. But as they moved deeper into Confederation space, the security became tighter. By the time they reached the Kepler system, they were being escorted by 2 destroyer-class vessels. Science. Station Kepler 7 requesting verification of prisoner transfer came the communication from the research facility. Marcus keyed the response carefully. Bounty Hunter Vance Cross requesting permission to dock. I have the fugitive Lyra of the Moonkin Pack for interrogation and processing. There was a long pause. Then, permission granted. Proceed to docking bay 7. Security will meet you at the airlock. As the defiant spark settled into the docking bay, Marcus felt his heart racing. They were walking into the heart of enemy territory, with nothing but forged documents and a desperate plan. The security team that met them at the airlock was professional but not overly suspicious. Marcus had learned long ago that confidence was the best disguise. Act like you belonged somewhere, and most people would assume you did. Bounty Hunter Cross, the lead security officer said, checking his datapad. You're early. We weren't expecting delivery for another 3 days. Marcus shrugged, keeping one hand on Lyra's arm as if restraining her. Found her sooner than expected. Pirates in the Vega system were hiding her. Figured you'd want her delivered quickly. There's talk of a rescue attempt. The security officer's eyes sharpened. What kind of rescue attempt? Moonkin sympathizers, maybe some of the independence movements. Nothing concrete, but enough chatter to make me nervous. Marcus had practiced this conversation during the journey, mixing truth with plausible lies. That's why I brought extra restraints. Lyra played her part perfectly, keeping her head down and her ears flattened in apparent defeat. The officers barely looked at her. To them, she was just another terrorist being brought to justice. We'll need to process her through security first, the officer said. Standard decontamination and medical screening. You can collect your payment from the administration office. This was the moment Marcus had been dreading. Once they separated him from Lyra, their plan would become much more difficult. But he had prepared for this contingency. Actually, he said, I'm under contract to deliver her personally to Dr. Yanez. Direct orders from Commander Voss himself. The mention of Voss, the same officer who had imprisoned Lyra, had the desired effect. The security team exchanged glances, clearly not wanting to interfere with orders from such a high-ranking official. I'll need to verify that, the lead officer said. Of course, but Dr. Yanez is expecting us in 20 minutes. The commander was very specific about the timing. Marcus checked his chronometer with studied casualness, something about optimal neural interface readings during the subject's circadian low point. The scientific jargon, combined with the implied urgency, did the trick. The security officer nodded. Right. I'll escort you to Dr. Yanez's laboratory myself. As they walked through the research station's corridors, Marcus took careful note of the layout. The facility was larger than it had appeared from outside. Multiple levels connected by lift tubes with restricted access areas marked by heavy security doors. Scientists and technicians moved between laboratories with the focused intensity of people working on something important. And everywhere, Marcus saw signs of the weapons program Lyra had described. Biohazard warnings, containment protocols, and sealed transport units that could only be used for dangerous materials. Whatever they were building here, it wasn't meant for peaceful purposes. Dr. Yanez turned out to be a tall, thin Altarian with pale green skin and multifaceted eyes. She was waiting for them in a laboratory filled with sophisticated scanning equipment and what looked like interrogation chairs. Ah, the infamous Lyra, Dr. Yanez said as they entered. I've been looking forward to this opportunity. Her neural interface patterns are quite unique among the Moonkin. Marcus felt Lyra tense beside him, but she maintained her defeated posture. Dr. Yanez circled them like a predator examining prey, her compound eyes reflecting light and unsettling patterns. You may go, Dr. Yanez told the security officer. I can handle one restrained prisoner. As soon as they were alone, Dr. Yanez activated a containment field around the room. Privacy protocols, she explained to Marcus. Can't have sensitive information leaking out. This was both good and bad. Good because it meant they wouldn't be overheard. Bad because it meant they were trapped if things went wrong. I'll need to conduct some preliminary scans before the interrogation. Dr. Yanez continued. Please secure the prisoner in chair number 3. Marcus guided Lyra to the indicated chair, which looked more like a torture device than medical equipment. Neural interface cables snaked from the headrest and restraint clamps were built into the arms and legs. This will only take a moment, Dr. Yanez said, approaching with a scanner. As she bent over Lyra, Marcus made his move. The plasma pistol he'd concealed under his jacket came out smoothly, pressing against the back of Dr. Yanez's neck. Actually, Doctor, I think we'll be asking the questions. Dr. Yanez froze. What is the meaning of this? You're a bounty hunter. I'm a human, Marcus said simply, and humans don't like genocide. Understanding dawned in the Altarian's compound eyes. You're not Vance Cross? Marcus Chen, Colonial Defense Corps, retired. Marcus kept the weapon steady while Lyra freed herself from the restraints. And she's not a terrorist, she's a witness. Dr. Yanez's skin shifted to a darker shade of green, fear, Marcus guessed. You don't understand the importance of this research. The Moonkin empathic abilities make them a threat to galactic stability. Because they can sense lies? Lyra stood up, her pale eyes blazing with anger. Because we revealed your plans for genocide? Not genocide, Dr. Yanez protested. Population control. Targeted reduction of species that pose a threat to the greater good. Whose greater good? Marcus demanded. Who decides which species get to live and which ones die? Dr. Yanez didn't answer, but her expression said everything. The Confederation had appointed itself judge and executioner for the entire galaxy. Show us the research data, Marcus ordered. All of it, I cannot. The security protocols. Doctor, Marcus said quietly. I've been fighting bullies my entire life. Space pirates, corrupt officials, military dictators. They all have one thing in common. When pressed, they're all cowards. So I'm going to ask you once more, politely. Show us the data. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Dr. Yanez moved to her computer terminal with trembling hands, inputting access codes. The holographic display filled with files, research notes, and project timelines. What Marcus saw made his blood run cold. The weapons program was far more advanced than they had suspected. The Confederation hadn't just been developing species-specific bioweapons, they had already tested them. Epsilon Eridani, Lyra whispered, reading from the files. The plague that killed the Crystalline Collective wasn't natural. Field test number 7, Dr. Yanez said quietly. 97% effective against silicon-based life forms. Considered a complete success, Marcus felt sick. The Crystalline Collective had been peaceful traders, renowned throughout the galaxy for their art and philosophy. An entire species wiped out by Confederation weapons testing. How many? He asked. How many what? How many species have you already killed? Dr. Yanez's silence was answer enough. Marcus forced himself to keep reading, downloading files to a portable storage device. The list of targets was extensive. Moonkin, humans, several other empathic species, and any race that had shown resistance to Confederation expansion. They're planning to deploy the human-specific variant in 6 weeks, Lyra said, highlighting a section of the timeline. Coordinated release in water supplies across 12 colonial worlds. Marcus stared at the data. Billions of humans dead from a plague that would appear completely natural. The Confederation would offer aid and support to the devastated colonies, moving in as humanitarian peacekeepers who would never leave. We need to get this information out, he said, pocketing the storage device. Every news service, every independent government, every resistance cell in the galaxy. You'll never make it off this station, Dr. Yanez said. Security protocols are already in effect. The moment you leave this laboratory, alarms will sound. Then I guess we'll have to improvise, Marcus replied. He turned to Lyra. Can you access their communication systems from here? Lyra moved to a secondary terminal, her hands working quickly across the interface. The circuit-like markings on her wrists glowed softly as she connected with the station's computer network. I'm in, she said after a moment. But their transmission array is heavily encrypted. I can break through, but it will take time. How much time? 20 minutes, maybe 30. Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Through the laboratory's reinforced windows, Marcus could see security teams moving through the corridors. Dr. Yanez smiled grimly. Too late, she said. Automated systems detected the data breach. You're trapped. Marcus studied the layout on the laboratory's emergency display. The station's power core was 3 levels down, protected by multiple security barriers. But if they could reach it, can you trigger a controlled overload of the power systems? He asked Lyra. Theoretically, yes. But why would we want to? Understanding dawned in her pale eyes. A distraction, more than that. If the power core goes critical, they'll have to evacuate the station. In the chaos, we can get to an escape pod. That's insane, Dr. Yanez protested. You'll kill everyone on board. Not if they evacuate in time, Marcus said. But the research data, the weapons, all of it gets destroyed. Lyra was already working at the terminal, her neural interface glowing brighter as she penetrated deeper into the station's systems. Security is adapting to my intrusion attempts. I can't maintain access much longer. Marcus could hear footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy boots, tactical gear. The security teams were closing in. Do it, he said. Lyra's fingers flew across the interface. Deep in the station's core, safety protocols began shutting down one by one. Warning lights flashed as temperature readings spiked. The escape pod drifted in the debris field for 6 hours before Marcus dared to activate the distress beacon. By then, the Confederation search vessels had moved on, presumably satisfied that anyone aboard the research station had died in the explosion. The ship that responded to their signal was a surprise, a battered freight hauler with mismatched hull plates and engines that sounded like they were held together with hope and spare wire. But when the airlock opened, Marcus found himself face to face with Captain Elena Vasquez, one of the few human smugglers operating in this sector. Marcus Chen, Elena said, grinning as she pulled him aboard. Should have known it was you causing all this trouble. The Confederation is going crazy, claiming terrorists destroyed their research station. Something like that, Marcus replied, helping Lyra and Dr. Yanez through the airlock. We need passage to neutral space, fast. Elena's expression grew serious when she saw their passengers. A Moonkin and a Confederation scientist. This isn't just smuggling, is it? No, this is bigger. Marcus handed her a credit chip. There's enough there to buy your ship twice over. All I ask is that you get us to Freehold Station and forget you ever saw us. Elena pocketed the chip without checking its value. For that kind of money, I never saw anything at all. During the 3-day journey to Freehold Station, Marcus worked on preparing the evidence they had gathered. The storage device from Dr. Yanez's laboratory contained terabytes of information, research data, communication logs, deployment schedules, and most damning of all, recordings of high-ranking Confederation officials discussing their genocide plans as if they were talking about the weather. This should be enough to convince even the most skeptical, Lyra said, reviewing the files with her neural interface. But who will we show it to? The major news networks are controlled by Confederation allies. Dr. Yanez, who had been silent for most of the journey, finally spoke up. There are independent journalists, resistance movements, even some Confederation officials who would be horrified by this information. The problem is reaching them before Voss's people track us down. Marcus had been thinking about the same problem. The Confederation's reach was vast and their resources nearly unlimited. But they had one weakness: they had grown arrogant. They believed their own propaganda about human inferiority, Moonkin terrorists, and the righteousness of their cause. We're not going to run and hide, he said finally. We're going to make this so public, so undeniable that they can't suppress it. How? Lyra asked. Marcus smiled. By doing something completely insane. We're going to broadcast this information during the Galactic Council's emergency session tomorrow. Both Lyra and Dr. Yanez stared at him. The Galactic Council was meeting on Proxima Station to discuss recent terrorist attacks on Confederation facilities. It would be the most heavily guarded location in the galaxy, with representatives from hundreds of worlds. That's suicide, Dr. Yanez said. Security around the station will be impenetrable. For a direct assault, yes. But what if we didn't need to get onto the station? What if we could hijack their broadcast signal from outside? Lyra's ears perked up with interest. A quantum entanglement link. If we could establish a connection with their communication array. I could do it, Dr. Yanez said slowly. The emergency broadcast protocols I developed for the research station could be adapted, but we'd need to get close enough to establish the initial link. Marcus was already pulling up star charts on Elena's navigation computer. Proxima Station orbits a red dwarf star. Lots of solar radiation, electromagnetic interference, perfect for hiding a small ship. Elena's ship would never get past the security perimeter, Lyra pointed out. No, But the Defiant Spark might, if I can get back to it. The plan that emerged over the next few hours was complex and dangerous, relying on split-second timing and more than a little luck. But it was also their best chance of exposing the truth before the genocide weapons were deployed. Freehold Station was buzzing with activity when they arrived. News of the research station's destruction had spread throughout the underground, and everyone was speculating about what had really happened. Marcus used the confusion to his advantage, quietly putting out word that he needed a ship and crew for a special job. The response was immediate. Smugglers, pirates, and mercenaries who had reasons to hate the Confederation began volunteering their services. Within hours, Marcus had assembled a small fleet of ships and crews, willing to participate in what was essentially a suicide mission. Why? Lyra asked as they watched the volunteers gathering in Freehold's main hangar. Why would they risk everything for strangers? Marcus watched a grizzled Centaurian pilot explaining the mission to his crew. The pilot's homeworld had been pacified by the Confederation 10 years ago. Its resistance movements crushed and its resources stripped for the Empire's benefit. Because they're tired of being afraid, Marcus said. Because they've seen what the Confederation does to worlds that resist. And because sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when you know you can't win. The assault on Proxima Station began at 1400 hours station time. Marcus's volunteer fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, broadcasting old pirate identification codes and demanding tribute from passing merchant vessels. The response was predictable. Confederation patrol ships moved to intercept what they assumed was a standard pirate raid. It was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. While the authorities were distracted by the obvious threat, the Defiant Spark approached from the opposite direction, hidden in the shadow of a passing asteroid. Electromagnetic interference is increasing, Lyra reported from the sensor station. We should be invisible to their scanners now. Marcus guided the ship through the radiation field surrounding Proxima Star, using the stellar interference to mask their approach. The station grew larger in their viewports, a massive structure bristling with defensive weapons and communication arrays. There, Dr. Yanez said, pointing to a cluster of transmission dishes on the station's outer ring. That's the main broadcast array. If I can establish a quantum link with their system, how close do we need to be? Marcus asked. 50 kilometers, maybe less. 50 kilometers from the most heavily defended station in the galaxy. Marcus had attempted some crazy things in his life, but this was approaching the realm of impossibility. The Defiant Spark crept through the radiation field, every system straining to remain undetected. On the main display, Marcus could see the emergency session beginning in the council chambers. Representatives from hundreds of worlds were gathering to hear the Confederation's version of recent events. Signal lock established, Dr. Yanez announced. Beginning intrusion protocols. On the station, Marcus knew alarms would be going off as security systems detected the unauthorized access attempt. But it would take time for them to trace the signal back through the electromagnetic interference. How long? Marcus asked. 2 minutes to penetrate their encryption. Maybe 3? A proximity alarm chimed softly. 3 Confederation patrol ships were moving in their direction, searching the radiation field methodically. They hadn't spotted the Defiant Spark yet, but it was only a matter of time. 1 minute, Dr. Yanez said, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked. The lead patrol ship was less than 10 kilometers away now, its searchlights cutting through the interference. Marcus held the ship perfectly still, knowing that any movement would give them away. Got it, Dr. Yanez announced. I'm in their system. Beginning upload now. On the main display, the formal proceedings in the council chamber suddenly froze. The holographic displays flickered, then filled with the evidence Marcus and Lyra had gathered. Research data, deployment schedules, recorded conversations about genocide. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives began shouting, demanding explanations. The Confederation delegates tried to claim the information was fabricated, but the technical authentication codes were impossible to fake. Upload complete, Dr. Yanez said. The entire database is now in their system. They can't delete it or claim it's false. The patrol ships had spotted them now, their weapons charging for attack, but Marcus was already moving, diving deeper into the radiation field where their targeting systems would be useless. This is Proxima Control to unknown vessel, came the transmission. You are under arrest for terrorist activities. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Marcus keyed the response with a grin. This is Marcus Chen, formerly of the Colonial Defense Corps. The information you just received is genuine. The Confederation has been developing genocide weapons and testing them on civilian populations. The evidence is in your computers now. Verify it for yourselves. The first plasma bolts sizzled past the ship, but they were firing blind through the interference. Marcus pushed the engines to maximum, racing away from the station as more ships joined the pursuit. Will they believe it? Lyra asked, monitoring the council session on long-range scanners. Some will. Others won't. But the truth is out there now. They can't suppress it or claim it never happened. Marcus plotted a course for the outer system, where they could jump to hyperspace. Sometimes that's all you can do. Make sure people know the truth and hope they do the right thing with it. Behind them, Proxima Station was in chaos. The emergency session had devolved into shouting. 6 months after the Proxima Station incident, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The evidence Marcus and Lyra had broadcast had triggered the largest political upheaval in 1,000 years. 12 major worlds had withdrawn from the Confederation Alliance, forming a loose coalition called the Free Systems Union. 3 more had declared independence outright, and even some Confederation member worlds were demanding internal reforms. The Defiant Spark drifted in the shadow of an ice asteroid in the outer rim, monitoring long-range communications. Marcus and Lyra had become the most wanted fugitives in Confederation space, with a bounty of 50 million credits on their heads, but they had also become symbols of resistance, inspiring others to stand up against oppression. Another supply convoy hit in the Arcturus sector, Lyra reported, scanning the news feeds. The Freedom Brigade is claiming responsibility, Marcus nodded. The Freedom Brigade was one of dozens of resistance cells that had formed after the genocide revelations. Most were poorly armed and barely organized, but their numbers were growing daily. More importantly, they were making it impossible for the Confederation to operate in secret. Any word on the weapons facilities? He asked. 3 more have been shut down by their own governments, but Voss has moved the primary research to a mobile platform somewhere in the Veil Nebula. Lyra's ears drooped slightly. We've hurt them, but we haven't stopped them. That was the frustrating truth. Despite everything they had accomplished, the genocide weapons program continued. Voss and his allies had simply made it more secretive, more mobile, and more ruthless. Intelligence suggested they were accelerating their timeline, planning to deploy the weapons before more resistance could organize. We need help, Marcus said finally. More than just smugglers and pirates. We need someone with real military resources. As if summoned by his words, the ship's proximity sensors detected an incoming vessel. Marcus tensed, hand moving to the weapons controls, but the ship's identification signal showed it was friendly. Admiral Sarah Chen of the Free Systems Union Navy. Marcus blinked in surprise. Chen was his older sister, a career military officer who had risen through the ranks during the Confederation War. They had barely spoken in years, not since Marcus had left the service in disgust over the peace treaty that had sold out the human colonies. Permission to come aboard? Came Sarah's voice over the comm. Granted, Marcus replied, though his tone was cautious. Sarah looked older than Marcus remembered, her hair now silver, and her face lined with the stress of command, but her eyes still held the same determined fire that had made her famous during the siege of New Geneva. Hello, Marcus, she said as she stepped through the airlock. You've certainly made things interesting. Sarah. Marcus nodded formally. What brings the Admiral of the Free Systems Navy to my humble salvage ship? You know damn well what. Sarah's gaze shifted to Lyra, who had been watching the reunion with curious eyes. You've started a war, little brother. The least you could do is help us win it. The briefing Sarah provided was sobering. The Free Systems Union had managed to organize a navy of sorts, combining ships from the breakaway worlds with volunteer vessels from across the galaxy. But they were still vastly outnumbered by Confederation forces, and without their own shipyards, replacement vessels were impossible to come by. The Confederation is moving toward open warfare, Sarah explained, projecting a tactical display in the ship's common area. They claim we're harboring terrorists and supporting piracy. Their fleet is massing for what they're calling Operation Cleansing Light, a campaign to retake the breakaway worlds by force. How long do we have? Marcus asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4, But that's not the worst of it. Sarah highlighted a section of the display showing the Veil Nebula.
Intelligence indicates they're planning to deploy the genocide weapons during the offensive.
Target the resistance leaders first, then move on to broader population centers. Lyra stood up abruptly, her pale eyes blazing with anger. They mean to make examples. Show the galaxy what happens to those who oppose them. That's our assessment, Sarah agreed, which is why we need your help. The Free Systems fleet is strong enough to engage their conventional forces, but we need someone to stop the weapons deployment. Marcus studied the tactical display, his engineer's mind already working on the problem. The mobile research platform would be heavily defended, probably escorted by a squadron of destroyers. A direct assault would be suicide for anything smaller than a battle cruiser. What do you have in mind? He asked. Sarah smiled grimly. The same thing you've been doing for 6 months. Something completely insane that no one would expect. The plan she outlined was audacious even by human standards. While the Free Systems fleet engaged the Confederation's main force, a small strike team would infiltrate the Veil Nebula and locate the mobile research platform. But instead of trying to destroy it, they would capture it, taking control of the weapons and their research data. The technical challenge alone makes it nearly impossible, Sarah continued. The platform is essentially a mobile space station, with its own defense fleet and thousands of personnel. But if we could take it intact, we'd have proof of the weapons program that even the Confederation couldn't deny. Marcus finished. Plus, we could prevent deployment and maybe even reverse engineer countermeasures. Exactly. But it would require someone with intimate knowledge of Confederation systems, plus the technical expertise to take control of a facility that size. Marcus looked at Dr. Yanez, who had been living aboard the Defiant Spark since their escape from the research station. The Altarian scientist had proved invaluable in analyzing the weapons data, but she had also been struggling with guilt over her role in developing the genocide weapons. Doctor, Marcus asked, think you could help us break into your colleague's most secure facility? Dr. Yanez was quiet for a long moment. The mobile platform is called the Prometheus, she said finally. I helped design its security systems, and yes, I believe I could get you inside. But Marcus, if we're caught, Voss won't just execute us. He'll make us disappear completely, along with everyone we've ever cared about. He's already trying to commit genocide, Marcus pointed out. I'm not sure he can threaten anything worse than that. Sarah stood up, gathering her briefing materials. The assault begins in 2 weeks. If you're going to do this, you'll need to move fast. The moment we engage their main fleet, they'll put the weapons platform on high alert. After Sarah left, Marcus found himself alone with Lyra on the ship's small observation deck. The ice asteroid rotated slowly around them, its surface reflecting the distant stars like scattered diamonds. Are you afraid? Lyra asked quietly. Marcus considered the question. Terrified. This isn't like the research station. We're talking about infiltrating their most important facility, surrounded by their best ships and troops. The odds of success are tiny. Then why do it? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the stars wheel past. Do you know what I was doing when the war ended? I was helping design defensive systems for the human colonies, shields, early warning networks, automated defense platforms. I spent 3 years building ways to protect people. What happened? Politics. The Confederation offered a peace treaty that looked generous on the surface. Autonomy for the colonies, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. But the fine print gave them control over our military and resources. My own government signed away our freedom for the promise of peace. Lyra nodded slowly. And you couldn't accept that? I couldn't accept that all those people who died in the war had died for nothing, that we just traded one master for another. Marcus turned to look at her. When I found you in that cell, chained like an animal for trying to prevent genocide, it reminded me why I became an engineer in the first place. To build things, to protect people, to fix what's broken, even when it seems impossible. Marcus smiled. Especially then. Humans are stubborn that way. We don't know when to quit, even when we should. Over the next week, they prepared for what would likely be their final mission. Marcus modified the Defiant Spark systems for stealth and speed, while Dr. Yanez worked on programs to crack the Prometheus's security. Lyra used her neural interface to map out the facility's layout based on stolen intelligence reports. The volunteers came without being asked. Helena Vasquez arrived with her freight hauler converted into a makeshift assault ship. Korax brought 3 fast courier vessels crewed by smugglers and pirates. Even some of Marcus's old engineering corps buddies showed up, bringing technical expertise and military-grade equipment. "You know this is suicide," Elena said as they reviewed the final plan. "Even if we get inside, the chances of getting out alive are practically zero." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But the chances of stopping genocide are pretty good. And sometimes that's enough." The Veil Nebula was a region of ionized gas and stellar debris that stretched across dozens of light-years. Navigation was treacherous, sensors were unreliable, and communication was nearly impossible over long distances. It was the perfect place to hide a mobile research platform, HFY. The missile salvo that should have destroyed the Defiant Spark never reached its target. At the last moment, a massive explosion bloomed in the nebula's depths as something enormous emerged from hyperspace, directly between Marcus's ship and the attacking fighters. It was the Free Systems battlecruiser Indomitable, Admiral Sarah Chen's flagship, followed by half the Free Systems fleet. The surprise attack caught the Confederation forces completely off guard, their neat formation dissolving into chaos as ships scattered in all directions. "This is Admiral Chen to all Free Systems vessels." Sarah's voice crackled over the comm. "Operation Broken Chain is a go. Target the research platform and supporting vessels. Do not let them escape." Marcus stared at the tactical display in amazement. "How did they get here so fast?" "Your transmission," Lyra said, monitoring the communication channels. "The coordinates reached the fleet before we were captured. They must have jumped immediately." Dr. Yanez looked up from her console, tears still streaming down her face. "My children, if the Confederation loses, Voss will kill them." "Not if we get to him first," Marcus said grimly. He opened a channel to the Indomitable. "Sarah, we need to board the Prometheus. There are hostages aboard." "Negative, Marcus. That platform has enough firepower to gut a battlecruiser. We'll take it out from long range." "You can't. The weapons research, the hostages, we need to get inside. I won't risk the fleet for a rescue mission." Marcus closed the channel and turned to his crew. "Anyone who wants to transfer to the fleet ships, now's your chance. What I'm about to do violates every rule of military sanity." Nobody moved. Elena actually laughed. "Hell, Marcus, we've come this far. Might as well see how it ends." The Defiant Spark dove through the expanding battle, dodging fire from both sides as Marcus pushed the engines beyond their design limits. The ship's stealth systems were useless. Now every sensor in the nebula was tracking them, but speed and unpredictability were serving them just as well. The Prometheus was trying to maneuver away from the Free Systems fleet, its massive bulk slow to respond, but it was still the size of a city, bristling with defensive weapons that carved deadly patterns through space around it. "Hangar Bay 7 is open," Dr. Yanez reported, highlighting a section of the platform's hull. "Emergency evacuation procedures. Security will be lighter there." Marcus aimed for the opening, threading the ship between automated defense turrets and incoming missiles. The Defiant Spark scraped through the atmospheric barrier into the hangar bay, landing hard enough to buckle several deck plates. The hangar was in chaos. Technicians and scientists were evacuating while security teams tried to establish defensive positions. Marcus's crew hit the deck running, weapons ready, moving with the practiced coordination of people who had fought together before. "The research labs are 12 levels up," Dr. Yanez said, consulting a wall display. "If Voss is here, that's where we'll find him." They fought their way through corridors filled with panicking evacuees and confused security personnel. The platform shuddered around them as the Free Systems fleet concentrated fire on critical systems, trying to disable the facility without destroying it completely. When they reached the research section, they found Voss waiting for them. The Confederation commander stood in the main laboratory, flanked by a dozen elite guards and a small group of terrified hostages, Dr. Yanez's family among them. "Ah, the infamous Marcus Chen," Voss said as they entered. "And the terrorist Lyra. How good of you to deliver yourselves personally." Marcus kept his weapon trained on Voss while scanning the laboratory. The walls were lined with containment units holding what looked like biological samples. In the center of the room, a massive computer core hummed with activity. "The weapons," Lyra whispered. "They're here." "Indeed," Voss confirmed. 12 different variants, each tailored to specific genetic markers. Moonkin humans, crystalline collective survivors, all the troublemakers who refuse to accept the natural order. Natural order? Marcus couldn't keep the disgust out of his voice. "You mean genocide?" I mean evolution. The galaxy doesn't need dozens of competing species, each with their own agendas and conflicts. One unified civilization, guided by the most advanced races. That's the future we're building. By murdering everyone who disagrees with you. Voss shrugged. Sometimes pruning is necessary for healthy growth. The platform shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the laboratory's viewports, Marcus could see free system ships closing in, their weapons carving chunks out of the platform's hull. Your rescue fleet is too late, Voss continued. The weapons are already deployed. Automated delivery systems launched an hour ago. By the time you breach this facility, millions will already be dead. Marcus felt his heart sink, but Lyra stepped forward, her pale eyes blazing with determination. You're lying. I can sense deception, remember? The weapons are still here. Voss's confident expression flickered for just a moment, long enough for Marcus to realize she was right. The Confederation commander was bluffing, trying to demoralize them into surrender. Even if they are, Voss said, recovering quickly, you'll never leave this room alive, and Dr. Yanez's children will die slowly for her betrayal. Dr. Yanez made a sound somewhere between a sob and a growl, her compound eyes fixed on Voss with pure hatred. You promised they would be safe if I cooperated. I promised they would live. I never said anything about safety. That was when Marcus realized something important about Commander Voss. For all his talk about superior races and natural order, he was still just a bully who used fear and cruelty to control others. And Marcus had been dealing with bullies his entire life. You know what your problem is, Voss? Marcus said, slowly lowering his weapon. You think humans are weak because we care about each other. You think empathy is a flaw. It is. Emotional attachments make you predictable, manipulable. They make us dangerous, Marcus interrupted. Because when you threaten someone we care about, we stop calculating odds and start breaking things. He nodded to Elena, who had been quietly working her way around the edge of the room. She triggered the plasma charges they had placed in the corridor outside, blowing out the laboratory's main power conduits. Emergency lighting kicked in as the room plunged into semi-darkness. In the chaos that followed, everything happened at once. Dr. Yanez lunged toward her children while Lyra dove for the computer core, her neural interface already glowing as she fought to access the weapon systems. Marcus and his crew engaged Voss's guards in a firefight that lit up the laboratory like a deadly light show. The battle was brief but vicious. Elena took down 3 guards with her modified plasma rifle, while Corax used his forearms to devastating effect in close combat. Marcus found himself face-to-face with Voss himself, the Confederation commander wielding an energy sword with surprising skill. You cannot stop what we've started, Voss snarled as their weapons clashed. Even if you destroy this facility, there are others. The genocide will continue. Maybe, Marcus replied, parrying a vicious thrust. But it won't include you. The final exchange lasted only seconds. Voss was skilled, but he was also overconfident. He had never faced an opponent who combined military training with an engineer's understanding of leverage and structural weak points. Marcus's plasma cutter sliced through the energy sword's hilt, then continued on to end the fight permanently. Got it, Lyra announced from the computer core. I'm in the weapons control system. Beginning destruct sequence now. Around the laboratory, the containment units began venting their contents into space. 12 different variants of genocide weapons, each representing years of research and countless innocent lives, dissolved into the vacuum of space. But the victory came at a cost. The platform was breaking apart under the free systems assault, and structural integrity was failing throughout the facility. They had minutes, maybe less, before complete collapse. This way, Dr. Yanez called, leading them toward an emergency transport that would take them back to the hangar level. She carried her youngest child while her older daughter clung to her side. The journey through the collapsing facility was a nightmare of sparking cables, buckled bulkheads, and corridors that led nowhere, as sections of the platform broke away into space. But Marcus's crew had survived worse. They moved with the calm efficiency of people who refused to panic even when everything was falling apart around them. They reached the Defiant Spark, just as the platform's main reactor began overloading. The ship lifted off through a hangar bay that was already open to space, dodging falling debris as the Prometheus tore itself apart. Clear of the blast radius, Elena reported as they put distance between themselves and the dying platform. But we've got company. The surviving Confederation vessels were regrouping, apparently deciding that destroying the evidence was more important than preserving it. A squadron of destroyers was moving to intercept them, weapons charging. "This is Admiral Chen to Defiant Spark." Sarah's voice came over the comm. "You are clear to jump to hyperspace. We'll handle the cleanup here." But Marcus was looking at the tactical display, counting ships and calculating odds. The Free Systems fleet was outnumbered, and several of their vessels were already showing damage from the prolonged battle. "Negative, Admiral. We're staying. Marcus, don't be an idiot. You've done enough."